If your old GM car has a fuel gauge that, like this one, sticks between a half tank and a quarter a tank, but will go down to 0 when it's empty, I've got the fix for you. Welcome to the Burnouts and Rotorblades YouTube channel. Let's go do something awesome. First thing we're going to do is verify that whenever we raise and lower our fuel tank sending unit, that it gives us the 0 to 90-ish ohms that we're supposed to get all the way up here at the dash, making sure that the gauge has a proper signal and that there's not another problem with the system. For this gauge right here, what I've done is I've just put test leads between the actual plug and the back of the gauge. Now we're going to take the test lead off that goes to the sensor wire. It'll be the one that's not a direct ground and not 12 volt power. We'll put that white clamp that we just pulled off the back of the gauge onto this and ground it out. And we'll see here that we have just about 90 ohms coming from the gas tank. I'll go ahead and lower the fuel sender to the empty level to make sure that we have a proper reading all the way through the full sweep of the gauge. And it looks like our ohms check out 0 to 90. With the power on and the gauge at its weird reading, we're going to take the signal wire off and make sure it goes all the way up to 100% full, verifying that the gauge works. But whenever you reattach the signal wire, it goes back to that quarter to half reading. You know your gauge is good, and it's most likely this resistor that's bad. Let's go over to the workbench and test that out. With the resistor on the gauge, we should see approximate resistance of 47.7 ohms. So let's test this resistor uninstalled from the gauge. Resistance should be about 94 ohms if this is good. I've already used 1000 grit sandpaper to clean off the contacts. 0 resistance, so that resistor right there is bad. So I've gone down to the local electronic supply store and I've sourced a couple of different options to replace the Chevy resistor that was on the back of our fuel gauge. Now, the options that I picked are in two groups. This group over here and this group over here. This is a whole bunch, way more than I need for like $2 or $3 it was, for 100 ohm resistors, quarter watt with 5% error. These stripe codes over here are supposed to mean something, but that's magic and unicorns. PFM I think is the proper term. The other set over here is an 82 ohm and a 10 ohm setup. Now the point of that is to get me close to that 94 ohm sweet spot. I typically will see like quarter watt stuff on the back of gauges like that, but if this burns out and fails, I'll just take it up a notch with 2 of these in series, which would make the total ohm for these 2 in series for that circuit 92 ohms. They don't have a 94 ohm resistor that's not custom like what Chevy made here. Let's go ahead and clean up our ceramic portion of the Chevy resistor and make sure that there's no erroneous inputs of ohms to our gauge. So no ifs, ands, or buts about it, we're gonna go for it. What I've done is I've hooked this gauge up. The white wire is the sensor wire from the fuel sender, which is just sitting on top of the tank in the back if you remember. I've squeezed this thing over to empty. I'm gonna flip the ignition on, and if this works, if all this work that we did works, this thing's gonna go up to full. I'll do a little dance, and then I'm gonna show you some other common failures with these from a working system. I'm basically going to break the system with these test leads to show you other examples of ways this thing can fail and what you're going to see on the gauge whenever it happens. First I gotta go get my keys. Here we go. And it's almost at full. That looks like full to me. That's a win. We've already seen what it looks like whenever you have a failed resistor in the back. It sticks to that 1/4 to 1/2 range over there on the side. So now, at a full tank, I'm going to cause a break in the sensor wire, this white one, from the fuel sending unit in the back from the level gauge. So this is just a straight up break somewhere and just goes up past full. Now we're going to see what it looks like whenever you lose a ground with a full tank. And with a ground wire fault, it goes slam over to empty and it'll stay there even if your tank is actually full. And then obviously you can guess what happens whenever you lose power with a full tank. Oh, and then that's the power one coming off, and it just doesn't move no matter what with the power one off. Let's make sure it works to the entire range. Full. And all the way down to empty. Now that we've verified that this gauge is working, you may be wondering, what does a working gauge look like to an ohm meter? The way this one's set up is, this is the sense wire, this is the power wire, this is the ground wire. So, power to ground, you've got 158 for whatever reason. So if I put this in here in a way where it stays, I can flip this over and we can go through the entire sweep. And it's really, really close to the same the whole way through. Now we're going to go to power to sense wire, and that should be half of the ohms of the resistor. So since this one reads about 98, about 48 and change is about perfect. Now we'll go ahead and test ground to resistor, 109 ohms through the entire range. Pretty close to the same, no big deviations. Let's put this thing back together.
This gauge lens is super oxidized and gross and just difficult to see through. I couldn't put it back in the car like that. Let's spend a little time and clean it up before we throw it back in.
So part of the biggest problem with the fuel system that we're going to take care of this time, since we have the fuel tank out, it has to do with how the tank works. It doesn't vent. The vented cap that I bought never really did the job that it was supposed to, and I'm really just tired of messing with buying caps, so I'm going to put a proper vent on it. The other thing that it doesn't do well is return, and looking at the stock vent cap that I used as a return, I mean, it's not hard to see why. The restriction in it comes from the tiny line size. So I install a return line here that goes into the cap and then dumps down into the tank, and a vent line here. That loop is going to act kind of like a P-trap does inside of your plumbing system. Then it's going to go up here to this little check valve that I bought for from Summit Racing. The point of this is that it can vent out, but should it ever flip over, it won't allow any of the fuel to spill out of the tank. Now that we've got all this, let's go ahead and install it on the tank for the last time and get it all finally plumbed in, and then we can finally put the tank back in the car and take this thing out and do some burnouts. Well, I hope this video helps you out with your fuel gauge issues. It surely helped mine, and now it completely works. I'm not finished putting the dash back together because we're going to move on to another project, but... Well, hello, officer. Wait for the camera.
What?
Wait for the camera. Check me out next time. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you later.
Don't forget to subscribe if you like the content and want to see more like it. And as always,